Lesson 8.5, Areas of Parallelograms. So what I usually tell people to do in this situation is grab a 3x5 card, get yourself a pair of scissors and cut off an angle, any angle you want, and then place it next to the 3x5 card over there so that you no longer have this piece. I ask them, what shape did you create? And most people notice it's a parallelogram now, was a rectangle. So what was the area before? Well, if it was 3x5, and that's usually in inches, area is just base times height. 3 inches times 5 inches is 15 inches squared. What is it afterwards? Well, clearly we haven't thrown any of the paper out, so it's the same. Nothing's changed. So, knowing that, how do you find the area of a parallelogram? Well, it's just base times height, but make sure your height is drawn perpendicular. So that has to be the height. This is the base, or this is the base. The problem when we draw a base in here, a lot of people get confused. They don't realize the whole base. And a lot of people get confused when I put let me put numbers in here. Base is 4. Height is 3. A lot of people get confused if I put a 5 here. They say, oh, that's the height. Or they're not sure what it is. So the area for this one is just base 4 times height 3, 12 units squared. That's it. Look for the perpendicular height, and you're good to go. So I would pause the recording and try these. They're not that challenging. Just remember that this is not part of the parallelogram. It's just there to show you the perpendicular height from the base. So area is 10 times 12, 120 yards squared. Area is 8 times 14 equals 112 feet squared. Area is 7 times 11 equals 77 centimeters squared. That's it. Simple enough. Just don't fall for all the tricks. Remember to look for the perpendicular height. Perpendicular, perpendicular, perpendicular. So, how do we find the area of a triangle? Hopefully you remember. If this is your base, call it base is equal to 12 meters. Then your height has to be perpendicular to that base. Height equals 7 meters. And we say the area is 1/2 the base times the height, which in this case is 42 meters squared. So we talked about the triangle because now we look at a rhombus. Rhombus is just a shape with 4 sides. Each side is equal length. Put the little tick marks. Hopefully you remember, and if not, that's why we review things, that the diagonals, and these are diagonals, meet at right angles, creating 4 congruent triangles. So if I was to tell you the length of the diagonals, we'll do this diagonal here. And we'll do this diagonal here. We're 10 and 14. Well, then you would look at it and say, okay, well, that means that this is 5, this is 5, this is 7, and this is 7. Well, if that triangle is 5 times 7, base 5 and height 7, and they're perpendicular, then we go 1/2 5 times 7, and that gives us one triangle. And for the rhombus, there's 4 of those triangles. They're all congruent. So we would get 4 times 1/2 times 5 times 7, which is 70 units squared if we want to go there. And that's how I do the area of a rhombus. Now, most people have been taught in a geometry class that there's a formula where you just say, well, it's 1/2 diagonal 1 times diagonal 2. I don't like this because it's teaching you to be stupid. It's teaching you not to know the properties of a rhombus, and it's teaching you to just plug and chug without any understanding. If you're really into that, by all means, area of a rhombus is 1/2 10 times 14, which is shock of shocks, 70 units squared. So that's where the formula comes from. It's just basically saying the 4 triangles, blah, 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 blah. So try an example. I would do it both ways if I were you. Here's a rhombus. I'll say the outside is a 10. So you know you're dealing with a rhombus, but you don't know you have any right angles. The drawing's a little bit off. They sure don't look right to me, but that's why we draw them in. And I'll say this is 6, and this distance is 16. What's the area? Well, personally, I do it by the triangles. That makes this 8. Area is 4 triangles times 1/2 times 6 times 8, which is 96 units squared. Or you could do the formula approach. 1/2 of 16 times 12, because there's another 6 here, and that's 12 total, which equals, oh my goodness, what a shock, 96 units squared. Whichever way you want to do it, I'm a big believer in using intelligence over formulas, but it's entirely up to you. Good luck.